feel less alone, a beat in a kind of way. An echo of your voice rings and the sky turns gray. Is this what you wanted? I'm perpetually haunted by the ghost of you and everything that you put me through. I've been searching for someone to show me the light before the darkness takes a hold. Show me the light before I lose all control. Show me the light so I can finally see. Show me the light. Set me free. I pretend that I'm alright and go about my day, even though the thought of you still blows me away. I got to rise above it despite what you say. Yeah, I gotta keep moving and never fade away. Is this what you wanted? I'm perpetually haunted by the ghost of you and everything that you put me through. You were once here, but you're not anymore. Your memory erodes me like waves on the shore. Now I stand alone on cold, rainy nights. I've been searching for someone to show me the light before the darkness takes a hold. Show me the light before I lose all control. Show me the light so I can finally see. Show me the light. Set me free, yeah. Hey,
That was Show Me the Light by Worst Case Scenario and lead singer Matthew Tyler DeLeo, who we have with us here this evening on the interview. Welcome.
it is a pleasure to be here, Chris. How have you been, brother?
I've been all right. You know, I've been skiing injured, so. Well, I'm sure you know how that is.
I know exactly how that is. Maybe you should ski when there's snow on the ground, because from what I'm seeing outside, it does not look like it's weather to be skiing.
No, probably not. That's usually
the
how you wreck
snow.
yourself.
So what's going on?
Well, I figured we'd start by talking about Worst Case Scenario. This is your most recent band. You have been working through several bands over the many years, and we'll cover that tonight. So yeah, let's start with the actual music video. Like, what was the actual experience of like starting Worst Case Scenario and putting together that music video? Because that is necessary, and obviously that got you some exposure.
Yeah, it did. So I'll start with how the band was formed, and then get into the making of that music video, because you asked for both of those things, and those are two separate, different storylines. So Worst Case Scenario, aka WCS, was formed pretty much after the collapse of the band that I was in before, which was called City and Wires. I was doing a performance at a venue known as the Rock Pile, which is located near Kipling subway station. It's this bar that is like really popular with cover bands and tribute acts, and is located in the middle of nowhere. So next to nobody shows up, unless of course they're like, oh, my band is playing here, you should definitely drop by. So it's one of those places. But my band City and Wires was doing a set there. And then there was this hip-hop funk group that was called Earthphonics that was performing elsewhere on the set. They showed up 3/4 into our set. Like, we're already on stage performing. They missed load-in. And I was watching them go in through the front door while we were tearing it up on stage. And I'm like, who the F are these people? And I was sort of steamed afterwards, and I'm like, these guys are going to suck. So then they get on stage and they blow me away. And I'm just like, damn, they're good. I need to network and get to know these guys. And so I dropped off, business cards, shook hands, kissed babies. And I wasn't really getting any bites from the other members, but the one person that I bonded with was their guitarist, Paul J. Doran. And Paul was like a really interesting, he definitely struck me as a weirdo when I first met him. But after they did their set, we found out that there was also karaoke night going on at that exact same venue afterwards. But instead of being inside the club, it was outside on the patio. So Paul invited me to go out and sing a couple songs with the rest of his bandmates. And I did that. And I was just sort of sitting there going, well, that was a fun little experience. City and Wires collapsed in on itself. And I was just sort of looking at it going, well, I need to, hit the pavement, start applying for other bands. Paul sent me a message saying, hey, Earthphonics is kind of, separating and doing its own thing. Maybe we can get together and jam. So I brought Paul over to my place because I was sitting there going, well, let's see what we can hammer out. And if we can get on the same wavelength and start creating music together, then we can get the wheels turning. So Paul came down and he started playing on the acoustic guitar a riff, and I stopped, I listened to it, and I'm like, okay, this is what the melody is. And we started writing a song right there on the floor in my bedroom, which, the moment I realized I can write music with this person, I'm like, there's something that can happen with this, but we need to figure out what our act is going to be. I was having a hard time trying to find members. It's difficult trying to find musicians who want to create original material as opposed to a cover band or a tribute act. I find that very strange about Toronto. But I was looking at it, and I was talking with my roommate, Kathy, and I said to her, worst case scenario, if we can't find anybody, we'll just be an acoustic duo. And she looked at me and said, that's it. What do you mean that's it? That's the name of your band. Worst case scenario? Yes, your band should be called Worst Case Scenario. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. So I sent it over to Paul, and he loved it. And I'm like, well, this is now a thing. So we had the name that was down pat. We needed to find members. I don't remember who came first, whether that was Mario Cabral, who became our drummer, or if that was Michael Barnov, who became our bassist. They were both around at the same time. Michael Barnov played bass as well in Earthphonics, so Paul just extended that out. It was really Frank Afori who was the drummer in Earthphonics, but Paul also had that lifeline, brought him down, and we tried him out, and I'm like, yeah, he's all right. He's quiet. he's very quiet and reserved, but I think he'll eventually like grow. We'll figure out how he is on the personality spectrum. And then we brought in Mario, and Mario, I brought him in with like less than a week of training, and we already had like maybe 3, 4 songs already mapped out. So I was sitting there going, I think he might be pissed at me because I didn't give him enough time to work over the songs, but he's doing fine. So we'll figure out what to do. And Mario, eventually joined in. So with me, Paul, Mario, and Mikey, we became WCS. There was another group that was called Worst Case Scenario. So we abbreviated it for legal reasons. So that way, if somebody says, oh, I own the trademark to Worst Case Scenario as a band, we won't get in trouble. And we started, working our way up, unfortunately, working through promoters, because when you don't know anybody and you don't have, any sort of way in, you kind of have no choice but to go for the pay for play kind of people. We had our debut in a place called the Piston, which was either on a Wednesday or a Thursday night. And, after performing that one venue, I'm like, all right, we handled ourselves very well. If we can maintain this momentum, God help all the other bands in Toronto, because we're, breaking down doors. I can see this going long term. I could already see the wheels turning. So that is how the band started, and a brief little bit about the formation. If we do want to talk more in depth about it, I can definitely do that. But you also asked me about the music video. So the music video that we did, Show Me the Light, it was directed by a friend of mine, Sam Hardy, who I know through What to Play Gaming, which is a YouTube channel by my friend Michael DeVoe, aka Medium Mike. We had a couple songs that were already, tried and true. We knew that they were great, but we wanted our first single to be the most commercial song that we had. And Show Me the Light, immediately from the get-go, both me and Paul and everyone else was just like, that's the most commercial song that we got. So if we want to try to, get people's attention, get radio stations' attention, that's probably the one we want to do the music video for. We scouted around. We got the Live Room, which is in Lynx Music in downtown Toronto, which is a rehearsal studio. We booked it from 8 p.m. till, I want to say, we pretty much booked it overnight, but we got there at 8 p.m. and we went from 8 o'clock till around 2, 3 in the morning. All of that was done in one night. And we pretty much did the song multiple times over, and they took Sam Hardy, edited it himself. So not only was he directing, but he was also editing, but he edited it all himself. And, we gave minor critiques. He did feedback and changed everything. And that's how the Show Me the Light music video was made. It was also made, I want to say, March 2020. This was right before the pandemic shut everything down. So the plague was all
that really hurt a lot of artists, and I imagine you also struggled through that process. So my sequitur to this part of the conversation, get into the actual process of Toronto and the venues and the experience of trying to compel the band forward in a city like Toronto.
So I'm going to say a couple things that might seem blasphemous, but it is true through me being a musician, a booking agent for 3 of the major projects that I was in, both in Searching for Kim, WCS, and City and Wires. I was primarily the manager / booker / social media. Toronto, I feel, is an awful city for bands. It's a great city for people that want to see live music, for the consumer. It is awful for a band trying to make its way in the world. And what I mean by that is it's very cliquish. A lot of the bands that, get the major shows, it's a result of who you know, not what you know. And if you're not able to network, if you're not able to properly throw down or have either a promoter, venue, or a band to look at you and say, you've got value, then you're going to be, performing to clubs out in the middle of the week where barely anyone's going to attend to see you. And it pretty much does feel like, what the hell are we doing here? There were a couple times in WCS where that has happened. But as a whole, Toronto is great if you want to see other bands. It's really crap if you don't know anybody and don't have any sort of give or take with that. Otherwise, you're going to be spending a lot of time, toiling away in the salt mines of whatever live venue that you can get your hands on.
I've seen that effect in Toronto personally, and I can back you up on this, where people roll in for the one band that they were invited to see, and then they leave like they were texted like clockwork and show up the minute the next set starts.
Yeah,
I'm sure you've seen that. Yeah,
I've definitely seen that. I've done quite a few shows. One of the biggest memories that I ever had was we were doing Alma Combo. This is in my first band, Searching for Kim. And this was the second time we were performing. And we were doing one of these shows where one of the bands that came on before us brought a lot of people in. And I was looking at them and I'm like, this is a decent amount of people. We need to get up on stage. And my guitarist, Nate Mantle, at the time, he's like, well, there was a band that was on before us, but they couldn't make it tonight. So now there's this huge gap in the lineup. And I'm like, okay, well, we need to go on stage now because we're going to miss all these people. And his thing was, well, we're going to, like, the people that actually were going to come to the show and see us and support us, they won't be able to see us. And I'm like, well, them's the breaks. But I could tell when I was talking with Nate that this is something that would have caused friction down the line. Like, you definitely can sit there and look at it and go, okay, what is the option? Do I go with the one that will help propel us forward, or do I go with the one that'll make sure that I still have a guitarist about a month from now? So I chose the option that would keep Nate in our band. I chose to wait for the people to show up. Lo and behold, almost everybody bailed out. And that huge opportunity was taken from me. And I just looked over and I'm like, these people better be worth it. And we got maybe 3-4 people that showed up compared to a room of 20 plus. And those people never attended any of our future shows. So from that point on, I learned very early on what you have to do to survive. And it doesn't matter. You want to make sure that people will go and stay and see your set list. You got to immediately, don't give them reason to leave. If there's a gap in your set, fill that space. And when you're on that stage, your goal is to make sure that people don't want to leave. And if they're, talking and having conversations with other people, you got to figure out how on stage, how do I make it so that way their conversation is not worth the price of admission? How do I make it so that way they're like, what the hell is this? And that was my goal from that day on, and I got very damn good at it. My live performances with WCS was like part, punk rock show, part stand-up comedy, part wrestling. It was, how do I do whatever I can to get people gravitating towards me? And if that meant, okay, I'm going to be doing Van Halen scissor kicks, or I'm really going to emote with this song, or I'm going to talk smack to some of the members of the audience, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do everything that I possibly can to sell that performance. And there were times where it blew up in my face. Absolutely. But there were also times where people after the set came up to us and said, Matt, why are you not the headliners? Because the band that immediately followed you, they had no energy. And you pretty much stole the entire show. You guys stole everything. And I'm like, I did my job.
Very nice.
Speaking of stage antics, what's probably the most crazy story you can remember from being on stage at a show?
Good and bad.
Good and
Yeah.
bad. Okay, well, I'm going to tell you the worst show I've ever done. And this was not really my fault per se. This was more along the lines of there were so many things that went wrong. And this was actually during the time where we were at Sheridan College, both you and I together, Chris. My first band, Searching for Kim, had a show that was at Sheridan College, which was it was called the Connection Pub. It eventually, the Connection Nightclub, and then it eventually turned into the Marquee. But this was back when it was the Connection, which was more of a dance club, which is odd for a campus pub. But it started off with, it was a Battle of the Bands contest, and a panel would listen to the music demos that you would have, and they would determine whether or not you're good enough to have on stage. And we being a bunch of kids who had no money, nothing to record, absolutely nothing, we're just like, okay, well, let's record this on our phones, and maybe through the magic of Disney, they'll like us. Sent that in. Lo and behold, they did not like how incredibly basic it was. But I was looking at it going, okay, well, I guess we're out of it. The bar manager, Chuck Ehrman, sent out an email to all the bands that didn't make it the cut and said, so we have a workaround. We have one more spot, which is all based upon if you can get people to vote for you. And I looked at that and I'm like, okay, this is going to be an interesting thing, but if I can get people to vote for me, it can work. And I started, doing things as fairly as I possibly could. And what I mean by that is I am a nerd who spends a lot of his time on video game forum boards. I do YouTube video game reviews. I'm in on a lot of online video game networks and forums and stuff like that. And so I was like, hey, my band's performing at this thing. Please consider voting for us. And people that were part of those communities were voting for us so that we can get our first show. I had people from like Japan and Australia. And eventually, I was sitting there going, well, let's take a look at these bands and let's take a look at what the poll is, because they can update and tell you how many people were voting on the poll. And I looked at it and like we had maybe about 60 to 70 people. And two of the other bands had and these are bands that I had never heard of. They weren't established, but they had thousands of votes. And I immediately stopped and I'm like, something is going wrong here. And I don't understand what the ever-loving hell this is.
Ballot stuffing, 10 cents a piece.
It was ballot stuffing, and I'll tell you why. So you had
For the Battle of the Bands? That's crazy.
Yeah. So what I found out eventually a couple days later is you are allowed to vote multiple times. So what the other bands were doing was they would vote, then refresh the page, and then vote again, and consistently do that. But the thing you have to know about me is I'm very competitive. So I'm just like, okay, well, now that I know that this is what you're stooping to do, I live in an apartment flat that's like maybe about a 15-minute walk away from my college. On my weekends, I've got nothing. So I would basically show up on the Saturday and Sunday and spend hours just voting and refreshing the page. Eventually, the student council caught wind of what was going on between all the bands. They're like, hell no, we're not doing this. So they reset the voting and set it back to 0 for everybody. And they're like, all right, cool. We're going to keep track of the IP numbers, so you can't do this. Fair. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, but they can't keep track of the IP numbers for every individual computer in our Learning Commons. So what I did was, quite honestly, once again, walk across the street, use all the computers one by one in the Learning Commons. So log in, vote, log out, next computer, and so on and so forth. And then I went to abandoned classrooms and did that too. And I like this is all sort of going into it, right? Like this is skullduggery 101. Hi, pleased to meet you. I used to be a rogue, now I'm a bard. But we with the like a week before, the guy Chuck and the student council said, "Okay, you guys are in." And I'm like, "We're in?" Thank Christ, because I spent so much time voting, we didn't get a lot of time to practice. But it's okay. We're good to go. I know what's going on. We just have to go in and just practice maybe a couple days beforehand and we'll be good. Flash forward to 2 to 3 days before the performance, and our bassist, at the time, a kid in high school by the name of Ben Mueller, tells me, I can't do this anymore. And I'm like, the hell do you mean I can't do this anymore? Because we hadn't even had our first show. We'd written like maybe 5-6 songs, and we have a show in less than 3 days. And he's just like, I can't do this anymore because my parents said this will take me away from school. So I got to bounce. So he bounced. And it's 3 days before the show, and I'm down a member. What do? I do the only thing that I possibly can do. I call up just a random metalhead, one of my friends from Sheridan Anime Club, and I say, hey, do you know, sorry, he wasn't the bassist, he was our lead guitarist. I'm like, hey, I need a guitarist ASAP. I don't have a lot of money, but I need you to fill the role. And he's like, well, I can do the best I can, but it's going to be apparent that it's going to be apparent that I don't know the songs quite as well. So you're going to need to get on guitar. And I'm like, well, I wrote the song, so playing and singing live is going to cause me problems, but here we go. So I brought him into the rehearsal factory that was at Front in Sherborne. We trained, as much as we could within those 3 days. And, the day of the show, I'm a nervous wreck. Because, once again, I'm just a front man. Like, I can play and sing, but with a full band, I have timing issues. I'm not supposed to be the guy who plays the guitar and sings the songs. I'm supposed to write the songs and then get the band to learn their parts, so that way I just focus on the lyrics. It's very similar to what we were trying to do back in the day with TCRM. Throwback to you and me, Chris. But I'm there. I'm trying my best to not focus on the anxiety. And the student council pulls me aside and says, so Matt, you guys are going to be on first. I think we were on at around like 8 p.m. or so. We will let you know that this is going to be filmed for a provincial Battle of the Bands thing. So it'll go across with Ontario colleges all throughout Ontario, and is going to be judged by record label execs from Sony Music. It's also going to be filmed by the media arts team. There will be, that classroom will probably ask and interview you guys. But in the meantime, the gear that we have was provided from Long McQuaid, and we're missing gear. We're missing gear from the drum kit. So most likely we'll have those missing parts, but will probably show up during the middle of your set. And those parts, once again, were for the drum kit. So things like being able to keep the cymbals on the stands, like they were on the cymbal stands, but they didn't have that like nut that you screw in to attach it. So Will, our drummer, would hit the cymbals and he'd have to go forward and like grab it. He would try to use the kick drum, and the kick wasn't properly attached. Like the pedal wasn't attached properly to the kick drum. So as he would use it, the kick drum would slide forward and forward and forward and forward. And I was just sitting there. I'm going in between going on stage and before going on stage. So I'm going to jump back and forth like a Tarantino movie a little bit. But I'm sitting there and I'm like, this is going to be a nightmare, but I need to do what I possibly can. Due to time constraints, the Sheridan Media Arts crew didn't have time to interview us, but interviewed all the other bands on the docket. And we had done our set list We were on the final song in our set, which is about 20 minutes long. Like, our set needed to be 20 minutes. Ours went over, and they cut us off live on stage. And I remember throwing up my middle finger to everybody in attendance, basically saying, I'm done. I did everything I possibly could, and this went sideways. There's nothing I can do to make this better. I wanted to go out and smash everything that I possibly could, but that was the worst show that I had ever done. And everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong, but it also set a precedence. The fact that I was able to look at that and go, I still want to do this despite everything going horrendously wrong, kind of proves like, okay, I guess I really do want to go down this rabbit hole of music. And if this is the absolute worst it's going to be, let's make sure that all the other shows are better than that by leaps and bounds. And I'm trying to remember. Oh, yeah, one of the bands that we were opening for, so there were a couple bands on the docket. One of the bands was called The Dirty Nil, who showed up, like, gate crashed, and they actually became, like, they're on the indie scene. Occasionally they're on 102.1 The Edge. Good for them. They're from Hamilton. And then we opened for this band that I had never heard of, but apparently they were a pretty big deal, called The Stereos. So they were also sort of that. So that was everything that kind of went into that show. And that was the Nightmare show. And thankfully, no show that I've ever done was that awful.
This was before Mike Turner?
This was way before Mike Turner.
Yeah.
This was probably, I want to say, 2010, 2011.
And that was a little out of your control too, man. You try your
Yeah.
best and everything went catch 22.
Yeah, it was one of those things where it's like there was nothing I could do to make things better. I gave it the old college try. Hey. But it was just sort of me looking at it, shaking my head, going, I want to keep doing this. It just sucks that this is how things turned out. And luckily, all the other shows that I've done have been way better than that one. That is by far the worst show that I've ever done. And it was also my first show with a full band, right? So we didn't have, like, we had rehearsal experience, but like this was our first time cutting our teeth in front of a live audience outside of me doing solo shows at Sheridan College, which I've been doing for months and months before that event. But like as a full band, that was how we were going to test ourselves, to trial everything that's going on. So the best show I've ever done. I don't know the exact date of it. It was with WCS, because the other shows that I have done, like I was sitting there going, okay, what would be the best show? And at first I'm like, well, what about ones where, it was an amazing experience, but there was something else going awry in the background. And I'm like, no, that's not it. Let's go and do one where we basically stole the show. And that was probably the second time that we performed at Sneaky D's, WCS. I don't have the date right now, but I do have, I archive every single show that a band that I'm in has done. I just don't have that list in front of me, so I can't tell you definitively what day it was. But we were doing a show, and we were the second band on stage. It was supposed to be a 4-band showcase, which I absolutely detest, because if you're doing 4 bands, it means either the headliner or the very first band on stage is going to get screwed. One of the two ends up happening. But luckily, one of the bands that was supposed to be doing the set with us bailed out. So what had started off as a 4-band set turned into the optimal one, which is 3 bands. So the first person goes on, this one guy by the name of Taylor Simpson, who does an amazing set. Like, he started off as a solo musician and then managed to get bandmates together, and we were sort of sitting there and we're just like, I want to do shows with this guy again. And then we went on immediately afterwards, and so I'm like, all right, we've got the set list, the songs are killer, we need to bring the thunder. And we swung with everything that we possibly had. I was jumping around. I almost like jumped off stage into the people below type of thing. If I knew for a fact I would be okay on that landing, I probably would have tried. But like everything that, what's the best way to say it? There were people that were sort of over to the side before we went on stage. And then as we started doing our first songs, immediately everyone just stopped and like turned 90 degrees and looked directly at us. We had them in the palm of our hands. And as the set started going on, they started getting closer and closer and closer until they're right there up there with us. And there's that overwhelming feeling of, yes, we're doing it. We're actually legitimately blowing the roof off this thing. And it doesn't, like, I'm no longer at the stage where I look at other bands on the card as competition, but like to know that the reason why they're there is because of what you've done and you're doing things very well. It was like a massive pat on the back. And then immediately after us was this band called The Riches. They're great guys, but the sound in terms of like, it was such a completely different genre to the point where it's kind of like orange juice and toothpaste. When they went on, because we were doing alternative rock and punk rock, when they went on, it was David Bowie with the voice of David Byrne. And that you can tell right off the bat. It's like, okay, that's a weird transition. But like after we had taken everything down, people went back to where they were before, and they were no longer at the front, and they were, having their conversation. And afterwards, I felt sorry for them. But for me, that was the best show because it proved that whatever we were doing it right, and we were knocking it out of the park. Everybody from Mario to Mikey to Paul to me, like we might have had maybe a couple screw ups, maybe a timing issue, or maybe I might have said the wrong lyrics during one part of it, but like as a whole, everything felt right.
And that was how long into like you guys being together?
So that was, I want to say, it was just after the pandemic opened. So after things started, going back into the fray and sitting there going, okay, we'll bring you in. So I want to say 2020 or 2021, one of those two. It was spring because it was still cold outside. There was still like a bit of snow. The rain hadn't properly washed everything away, but we were just sitting there looking at it going, okay, we maintain this momentum, we'll be good.
And did you guys maintain the momentum?
So our thing is that we had some shows that definitely some were better than others. It was primarily like we were putting on some pretty decent shows, but there was an issue, and that issue primarily was, once again, we're doing good shows, but we're not having returning audiences. We're not having people come back to our shows. We're not having bands that we performed with invite us to do shows because we had extended lifelines out to them, but they wouldn't extend them back. And so we were looking inwardly at ourselves, trying to figure out what was going on. Mario, our drummer, took it as a sign of we must be doing something wrong. And he couldn't really find a problem with our sound. So he looked at it from the perspective of, okay, what is the one thing that stands out? Well, Matt is doing stand-up comedy in between songs, and he's being weird and goofy. So the problem must be Matthew's weirdness is turning people from the audience off. And that started an animosity between me and Mario Cabral, an animosity that eventually turned into him leaving the band. And I will get into that, but like, yeah, I was trying to maintain momentum, but there was a lot of things that were running against us. And one of the things were, we didn't have return people that were coming in. We were performing, but we weren't performing at like the right days of the week, so to speak. And the bands that we played with weren't extending lifelines out back to us. As a whole, it's very hard to keep up momentum when you're a show booker, when you have things that prevent you from doing shows, when you have other people in the band that say, I don't want to perform a show during the weekday because I have work. And that's fine, but if you want to start playing bigger venues, you have to sort of make those sacrifices and do those weekday shows, because everybody wants to play weekends. And when everybody wants to play weekends, the venues will look at it and go, okay, well, who can get the most people out? Let's bring them on for the weekend. If you want to do the Horseshoe Tavern in downtown Toronto, you have to do a show on Monday or Tuesday. Craig, who, hosts the things, he's like, okay, we have new music Mondays. Show up, don't suck, and we'll see if we can bring you on to something else. So not being able to go to some pretty big venues because other members don't have the ability to take time off, or other people just don't want to do stuff in the middle of the week, that completely kneecapped me from a booking perspective.
I've been there. I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, like, not wanting to do it, like, why being in a band then? I mean, those are the sacrifices you gotta make.
Yeah, there's an ongoing issue between me and Mario Cabral. I'm trying to get over it, but once again, he was able, after the split of the band, he was able to jump in and find another band after WCS fell apart. Spoiler alert. I haven't been able to find another band. So as a result of that, my head is currently stuck where I'm at, and I won't be able to really move on from those feelings until I have something new that's able to take me away from WCS.
Well, here's a question, and it's not meant to be dramatic. I mean, if anyone who's been in a band who's watching this, you'll understand. Have you ever had a band where there's more than two members who were genuinely committed on a full-time basis to driving it forward?
No. And that's
Nope.
the unfortunate thing. So I both you and I can probably attest to this, but me especially, I am ride or die when it comes to any creative project that I do. When I sit down and I want to be the lead singer of something, I look at everybody and I'm like, what's your plan? Because I can't see myself living in this society that I live in. I can see myself surviving. I can see myself doing low-paid labor work till the day I die, but I don't see myself being able to rise and grow out of that. And if I can't do that, then the only thing that I got is my artistic and creative passions. So for me, when I go and I join a band, some people are just like, well, it's just a hobby for me. For me, I'm like, I'm treating it like a hobby, but in the back of my mind, I want to devote everything that I possibly can into this. And that's what I am with WCS. So I'm going to very briefly lay out what each person's respective drive was in WCS. So in terms of commitment. So commitment-wise, I'm the front man. I was the manager. I did the social media. I did the booking. I was ride or die 100%. I wanted very much this to succeed because I don't see my life being able to move onward without some type of creative thing. I can't get a job that'll pay me more than 30 grand a year. So that was my main thing. Paul was the second most committed, and that's because he was co-songwriter. He clearly wanted to see the band succeed, but he wasn't like he had been in bands many times before, and so he was looking at it going, I want to enjoy this for what it is, but as well, I'm going to help in the songwriting creation. I'm going to create music that absolutely 100% I think is going to be the best that we can. I'm not going to half-ass that from the production standpoint. He also did the mixing and mastering entirely for our last EP, which was called World on Fire, which, I'll be talking about with that. So Paul, he wasn't like 100% committed. He wasn't ride or die like me, but he definitely had the drive, the ambition, and I appreciate the work that he did. The next person that I would say in terms of commitment wise would have been Mario Cabral. And the reason why I say Mario, because once again, there's little things that go into it. So the reason why I say Mario Cabral is the guy, even though mentally and emotionally he was very problematic to be around, he definitely, he was trying to network. He was trying to reach out and talk to other bands. He did do the album artwork for 3 of our releases, Show Me the Light, Tears in the Rain, and Melancholy. Like, that was all edited by him. So he was at least working towards that, and he was trying to network. And he took himself way too seriously, but the fact is that if he's taking himself seriously, he does care, right? He's not half-assing it. So I do respect Mario in regards to that. He's a great musician. He is an atrocious bandmate to have, but he is a great musician. And the final one is Michael Baranov. And I don't mean any insult to Mikey, but it was someone who very much is, I'm currently happy with my job. I'm making decent money from this. This isn't something that I can see myself getting committed to and going down the line. And I respected that because he told me that upfront and honestly right from that point. He's just like, I'm going to ride this out and see where this goes, but I don't see myself going on tour. I don't see myself doing anything crazy or zany. I'm just enjoying this for what it is. And he tried to do something, but he didn't really, it's not like he attempted, but okay, let me explain. Mikey wanted to make merchandise for the band. He wanted to make t-shirts. And so I'm like, all right, cool. Well, I'm doing all the booking, all the social media. I don't have the energy to do this. You guys need to do this by yourself, because if I start wearing too many hats, I'm going to get burnt out, and then I don't want to do this anymore. So figure it out on your own. So Mikey went out and he bought a t-shirt press, and he apparently bought t-shirts and ink, and he made a prototype of the shirt. It's the logo of our first single, Show Me the Light, which has the WCS and the the diamond triangle type of thing that we have. So he had created that. He created the one, and I'm like, awesome. Do more. You got the first one down. Keep doing more, and we have stuff that we could sell at shows. And he never did any more. And he did the one prototype, and I'm like, what was the point of that? It's if you're going,
good.
Yeah,
it's good. Yeah.
If you're going to do something, do it. And so he didn't do that, which was a problem for me. And out of everyone, because Mikey treated it as a hobby, we would go into the rehearsal factory and he would forget his bass parts. And I'd look at him and I'm like, we've got shows coming up. You need to know these songs. You need to know this set list. Paul should not be holding your hand and walking you through how to play, I don't know, Show Me the Light or Tears in the Rain or, some of our other songs for the umpteenth time. You should have this mapped out. And that was my problem with Mikey. I'm not throwing him under the bus. It was, quite honestly, that was the problem that came with working with each person and their amount of commitment and drive.
No, it's common. that's why I would agree with you. It's not throwing anybody under the bus. But it's a common challenge with finding a band that can succeed. Is you have to get all the moving parts moving together, and that's why I asked. The other question.
I was
Go
going to
for
say,
it.
we kicked our drummer out live.
Mm.
The guy just couldn't get a beat going, man.
On stage.
So yeah, I mean, I've had trouble. But go ahead, Chris.
No, my other question is you mentioned the difficulty of accruing and sustaining a crowd at venues and connecting in the city of Toronto. So, do you find that the genre of the age, whether your music is what's currently hot, in terms of what promoters are looking for, has that been a conflict that has been a challenge, or has it not really come up?
Not really. And what I mean by that is, so like every single venue that you go to will have a specific sort of scene. Toronto's problem is it's oversaturated. Like there's so many different places that you can go see live music, to the point where it's just like, unless you absolutely 100% know what you're getting into, you might not make a show up or an appearance. And when I mean by that, it depends on the scene as well. Hamilton has a very different music scene compared to Toronto. It is an industrial city, but there, when it comes to live music, people have more of a respect and a love for it, as opposed to Toronto, which feels very businessy, very regimented. Earlier I said, it's very cliquish. It is very cliquish. But in Hamilton, even though I'm not from the scene, when we did shows at the Kill Room, which is a hidden indoor skate park, and when we did shows at Corktown Pub, the people that were there really digged us, and it felt very welcoming, as opposed to when we were doing shows at, Sneaky D's or the Piston or, the Cavern. It was, don't get me wrong, Toronto was cool in the sense of, cool, I need to win over this audience every time. But with Hamilton, it was more along the lines of, I don't need to win this audience. I just need to put on a good show. So there was...
The cities are very, very different.
Mm-hmm.
What is Hamilton?
You hit the train tracks somewhere around Burlington, and then suddenly you're in Hamilton.
Yeah. Sorry, what did you ask there, Alex?
Is it a big city compared to Toronto, or like it's a suburban city?
Hamilton is an industrial city. The best way I can compare it to, are you in the States, just out of curiosity?
Yes.
Okay, the way I can compare it to is very similar to Detroit, Michigan. Industrial city, infrastructure hasn't been updated since the 80s. Used to be something pretty cool back in the day, but the times have not been kind, as the city needs a lot of updating and stuff like that. But despite what I say, just like with Detroit, there's a music underground there. There's an appreciation and adoration for live music that Hamilton also has. There are, a lot of punk and indie sort of communities that are willing to bring you in and to give you a try. And compared to Toronto, it's very much, once again, it's very corporatized. How many people can you get to come out to see you? Who do you know? Not how good are you? And so with Hamilton, I was able to sort of like walk in and say, hey, I want to do a show here. Cool. We'll put you on. But the question I want to ask is, how many people do you think that you can bring in? Well, we think we can bring in this many. Okay. We're still willing to bring you in, but you need to do this. So when we had to do the Corktown, for example, I talked to the person who runs the Corktown pub, and he's like, okay, that's not a lot of people, but we're willing to let you in. What you need to do is you need to find 2 bands that are from Hamilton that have like, at least some type of fan base there. And I'm like, I can work with that. So immediately I got out on Facebook and I started looking up all the Hamilton bands, and I was able to network, and they're like, oh yeah, we're more than willing to do a show with you. And I'm like, cool, you guys got a headline though. And they just stopped and they're like, but you're putting on the show. Yeah. the venue owner does not want us to headline because we're not from Hamilton and we don't have an audience. So because we don't have either of those things, you got a headline for us, despite the fact I am doing all the groundwork for you. And they're like, all right, we can do this. And this once again goes back into, we had extended lifelines out to other bands, tried to raise up other bands with us, do them a solid, throw them a lifeline. And when we don't get those callbacks, it did affect our morale, because we were just sitting there going like, we helped this band. We let them headline for us. Why is it that they're not, able to reciprocate that back to us?
Did you guys ever figure that out?
We had what was it called? A massive meeting in August of 2022 about what we were going to do going forward. And Mario had brought up some good points. He also said some things that weren't critiques, was more along the lines of trying to hurt me. But
yeah, that's what it sounds like.
Yeah, but I dusted myself off, because at the end of the day, my job is to keep the band together. You can throw shade, you can make my life a living hell, so long as we're able to get ready and go and do our set performances. But Mario had brought up some good points that we were going to implement, but we didn't get to implement them because we went into the recording studio. We were going to record and get this EP done. And then when the EP was done, then came, cool, now we can start booking shows. Now we can start planning festivals. We can do our itinerary, things like that. My entire plan was, cool, this EP won't be done until like November, December or so. So I need to start planning and building and taking the critiques and feedback that was from that conversation and carry it with us into 2023. The band, after recording the entirety of the EP, Mario left and joined another band. And as a result of that, I wasn't able to attempt any of the critiques, any of the feedback, any of the things that were brought up in that meeting to help us go forward. And when Mario had left, he's once again, he's a short man with an even shorter temper. He blew up at us in the most unprofessional way possible. Paul and I had a solo acoustic show of November, I think it was November 5th. We were performing at Tonight Live Happenings Music Bar, which is on 1704 Queen Street West. Great place. But Mario was supposed to be our social media guy, because I said, I can't do this anymore. I can book the shows, but someone needs to, help make this a little bit easier for me. And I said, Mario, you're great with social media. You take care of it. And I said, hey, it's about 2 weeks before the show, Mario. Shouldn't you be promoting the show? And he said, I'm not promoting the show because I'm not involved in it. And I'm like, what do you mean you're not involved in it? You're part of a band. You're part of an organization, a group. Yes, it's just going to be me and Paul doing an acoustic set, but you should be doing the necessary promotions, because that's the role that you said that you're going to do. And so when he didn't really respond to me or didn't say anything, I'm like, okay, well, I guess I better do this myself. So I started cutting promos with me and Paul and saying, hey, we got this show coming on. And I put it on our TikTok, and then I exported from TikTok onto Instagram and onto Facebook. And he blew up in our chat over how the stuff that I was sharing from TikTok to Instagram needed to be a Instagram story instead of an Instagram post. And he said, you know what? I'm done with this. F all of you guys. I'm out. And he stormed out immediately after that. And I had no idea any of this was going on because I was working at the time, right? I don't have my phone on me. So he pretty much like blew up. Then I went on my lunch and I'm like, the hell? Scrolling through, me scrolling through everything. Mikey, our bassist, looked at me and he said, this is before I even knew about Mario blowing up in the chat. Mikey had sent me a Facebook Messenger post saying, hey, I want to let you know that what Mario said isn't logical. It's emotional. He's looking for an excuse. And I was just like, what is that supposed to mean? He's looking
That's what
for
I was gonna say.
Yeah. What was that supposed to mean? He's looking for an excuse. What does that mean? And so I walked up the stairs to the break room, heated up my lunch, and I'm sitting there and I scroll through everything and I see everything blow up on the chat. And I'm like, what the hell? This is so. And so when I explained my side of the story to everyone else in the chat, I'm like, this is why I did things the way I did. Mario left the chat and he was out of the band and gone. And he joined another band. And he's in another band as well with Paul. He's in 2 bands. But that had deflated all the energy in the sales because I'm very much ride or die. So when we have someone who's a member of the band, he's an important part of the band, but he's not a crucial part because he doesn't help in the songwriting and he doesn't have any sort of major administrative responsibilities. So outside of just being a drummer, in my mind, he's easy to replace. So I was just like, all right, time to start hitting the pavement and seeing if we can get drummers that would come and replace him. And I had sent out stuff in Craigslist and Kijiji. We had an audition for a night in the middle of November. I think it was like November 25th or so. And the guy that we brought out for the audition didn't show up. He no-showed. And when he no-showed, I drove back. I dropped Paul off at his place. And then I drove back to my place. I routinely carpool with Paul. He doesn't have a car, so I'm like, hey, get my car. I'll drive you to the rehearsal factory. I'll drive you back. So after I dropped him off and I drove back to my place, I turned off my car and I got a text message from Paul saying, hey, this isn't fun anymore for me. And I need to go and do my own thing. And I immediately go into panic mode because once again, I'm ride or die. I don't join other bands when I'm currently in a project. I devote and spend all my time into making sure making sure my undivided attention goes to making that thing grow. I can deal with Mario leaving, but Paul helps me write the songs. It's a back and forth conversation. Paul writes the music. I look at the music and go, okay, this is the melody. We need to structure this so that the song is more commercial and it makes more sense. Because I'm very much a person who tries to make artistic yet incredibly commercial music. My entire thing is I want to make stuff that'll show up on the radio. So it's a back and forth. Paul will write stuff and I'll say, okay, this doesn't work. You need to rechange this part, or you need to make this long, or you need to shorten this. And so it's that back and forth conversation between me and Paul. When Paul is gone, it's not the same band anymore. It's like Guns N' Roses if it's just Axl Rose. And I know you're going to say, but that actually happened. Yeah, but I have the self-awareness to not do that. If this is going to be like primarily me as a songwriter, it's a Matthew Tyler DeLeo project, right? It's no longer WCS. So when Paul had left, Mikey was, once again, because he was very much like, I'm just doing it as a hobby and I'm riding it out to see how it should be. And now we've reached our conclusion, so I'm going to go. And for me, I'm going to say this, logically, the band, it pretty much was done. We had recorded our EP, but they had, the best way to describe what had happened was we had showed up at a restaurant and everyone ordered meals, and some people ordered stuff for the table, shareables and stuff like that. And they paid the bills only for the stuff that involved them, and then they left. But I'm still at the table. And I've paid for my stuff, but then there's stuff that's for the entirety of the table that they left me with to pay. And what I mean by that is the music was done. We had no album artwork. we had to put that out for promotion in terms of, hey, in order to get your stuff on Spotify, iTunes, all of that other stuff, you have to spend money. You have to spend additional fees. And like, we're with DistroKid, right? And DistroKid is basically a third party, and they're like, yeah, we'll put your stuff out. We'll put it out to Spotify, Deezer, we'll put it out to Apple Music, we'll put it out to YouTube, we'll put it out to everyone, but you got to pay us, right? And so that solely went to me, as well as getting someone who does the album artwork. And finally, I was the only person who put money down to build us a band website. So to basically be there at the table and to have everything sort of split up, and it's just like, okay, well, you know, we've done everything that we need to, and then leaving me with the vast majority of the check didn't feel right. I definitely felt like I got slighted. And it was a massive kick in the teeth. And over time, because I go by different, how I go through this is I start off being incredibly depressed. Because I'm like, everything that I worked so hard for is over.
That's shitty, man.
Yeah. And then I stop after I get my depression, and I'm like, I start remembering things. And I start realizing, wait a minute, what the heck just happened there? So like, I start looking at it going, they left me with the check, and I now have no band type of thing, but Paul plays in another band with Mario, and Mario plays in another band as well. And so it pretty much just felt like, okay, we're going to be fine, so we're out. And it felt like I got abandoned. I got pretty much backstabbed and abandoned by people that I thought were my friends. And okay, me and Mario went sideways, right? That is known to happen. That does happen. Cool. Me and Paul had hung out before the splitting of the band. We used to go skateboarding. We used to just hang out. We were not, like, we do not see eye to eye from a philosophical and a political standpoint. I am left-leaning socialist. He is right-leaning family values Christian, right? So we are completely opposite, but we were able to put aside our differences and just like hang out and do stuff. But the band split up in November, late November, and the months went on. And meanwhile, I'm spending the money to go and get our artist, Anthony Haley. He cost me about $300, and he did an amazing job, but that was still money out of my pocket that no one else was talking about. And, you know, it had gone from November to December to January to February to March, and I had not heard anything from Paul. Paul also plays, I'm going to refer to this person by last name because his name is also Paul, and this will be confusing. So the frontman of this band who plays with Paul and Mario is a guy by the name of Meanie. That's his last name. And Meanie had looked at me and said, hey man, you would come out to our previous shows back when WCS was around, and you would record our sets for us for free. We're doing a show in Oshawa. Would you be willing to drive all the way out to Oshawa and record our set with Paul, me, and Mario doing a set, and we'll pay you $100 for it? And I'm like, I don't want to be in a room with I don't want to be in a room with two of my ex-bandmates and seeing them enjoying themselves and knowing in the back of my mind, it's like, that was me. Why can't I have that type of thing? Like, I don't want to be someone who's like, I don't care if I become successful and if I make it, but I very much like to be able to perform sets. I like to be able to go out and do a show once a month, maybe in Toronto, maybe in Hamilton, and just be able to showcase my creative expressionism, right? Because it's very much like YouTube. I've made this and I very much enjoy it if other people are there to enjoy it with me. And so, you know, Meanie also said, "Oh, we're finally doing a show at Horseshoe Tavern on a Monday. Would you be willing to
That's fucked up, dude.
Yeah, would
Be
you be
compromising now.
Yeah, would you be willing to come out and record our set?" And immediately that was a massive insult. Meanie didn't mean that, right? But like knowing those two, knowing the baggage that they had, and then finally, as of I want to say about a week ago, finally, I get a response back from Paul. And it's not, "Hey Matt, how are you?" It's not, "How have you been? It's been a while." Like he does do the old like, "I needed to take a massive break from social media." Cool. But you're texting me. This isn't social media. You're texting me on the phone, but I'm letting it slide. And he's just like, "Yeah, I needed to take, a bit of a break." Anyway, "Do you want to record Lullaby, which is one of our songs?" And I'm looking at him and I'm like, this is the first time that you've talked to me in over 3 to 4 months. And it's nothing to repair our relationship. You're messaging me because you want something from me. And that's where I have a problem. I'm willing to go out and record that last single, whatever, because the music that we made was that damn good. But the fact that it's not to really like try to repair or try to get back and reconnect, it's about business, that's where I have a massive problem. And that's that like I was feeling sort of down and angry, but this definitely gave me like another side to Paul that I'm like, I don't know if I had to go back in time, I don't know if I've ever worked with this guy ever again. And that really hurts, and it made me feel really upset.
It seems like all this was premeditated.
I can't hear you because you mute in and out.
Oh, my bad. It feels like the drummer, he premeditated everything, man. The way he blew up and all that stuff, and like he was just like, "I'm out of here," all emotionally.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just sounds like
Mario very much is.
I know you're gonna find success, man.
Yeah. Mario very much is. There is no good deed that goes unpunished. You could do something that can help him, but if you don't do it appropriately, he will hold it against you. And I'll give you an example. Mario had an old beat to shit laptop, and this beat to shit laptop was what he used to do the editing for us, right? The editing, the album artwork for us. So he's like, "Hey, my laptop is pretty much about to go. It's not running as well. Can you fix it?" And I know a guy who's just like, you have a internal hard drive that is starting to go. I can transfer all the files on that internal hard drive onto a new hard drive and install that new hard drive in. So I'm like, all right, bring me the laptop and I'll see if there's anything that can be done. So he gives me the laptop. I go up to my friend. I'm like, "Hey, let's see what we can do." Pulls it out and says, "This hard drive has been in here for so long that there is almost next to no way that I can get any data on it. He should have done this years ago. At the very most, we might be able to save some of it, but here, go out and buy this new hard drive," which I did. Installed the new hard drive on the laptop. He should probably go to Staples or go to Best Buy, any people that do this professionally, because you're going to need professional help for this. This is way above my pay grade. And I'm like, "Thanks, man. I'll let him know that." And I brought it back, and he started blaming me for the laptop because it's like, it worked fine before I gave it to you. And so immediately from that exact point was when my relationship with Mario was always perpetually me on the back foot, because he always just seemed angry. And I was sort of sitting there going like, there is nothing I can do that will make you happy. And, once again, he had said some things during August that he had said some good critiques over what we could do to get the band to move forward. He said two things that were pretty much unforgivable from my standpoint, because I looked at it and I'm like, there is no critiques or criticism there.
Constructive.
This is deliberately just to hurt me. And now that the band is no more, I can decide whether or not I want to forgive someone or whether or not I want to have them in my life. And I have chosen it is much better for my mental sanity to set up boundaries and saying, you know what? I'm done with you. Like, if you're there at a show, I'll put up with you if you come up to me and talk to me, but I don't want anything to do with you.
We've certainly caught you at a fascinating time in an artist's career.
Yeah.
At the breakup point, so to speak. And
There's a lot of honesty, though.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
I love that.
I had
It's
warned
something I'm
you.
sure
I had
you-
warned you beforehand, because I'm like, I'm going to give you an uncensored opinion. I can't be unbiased because I'm part of this. I am biased out the wazoo, but I can tell you my side of the story. And
no
I'm not,
apologies needed.
yeah, I'm not trying to throw people under the bus, but in order for me to tell my story, it's going to paint some people in a negative light. And once again, so like, this is kind of like the breakup phase where, the band is no more and I'm stuck here. And the reason why I'm stuck is because I had to promote the album and do extra work on top of that. In order to promote the album, it involves me going through all these old videos and old photos of my bandmates and using that stuff to promote the group in a positive light. And, the stuff that I did, if you looked on the videos that I did on Instagram or the stuff that I did on Facebook, I did some really damn good work, but it took a lot out of me emotionally. It was causing me mental health problems because I had to subject myself to that. And it absolutely positively sucks. I know that I'm going to be all right if I can get another band and go from that point. But right now, I'm still hunting for bands. I'm still trying to find musicians that I'm able to work with, that, whether or not I'm going to join a band that's already established, which I hope, fingers crossed, because that means, hey, lo and behold, I don't have to go through the hell of trying to find people that are committed. Because it's easy for an instrumentalist to find an act, because they can come in and, they can be like a key member, but a vocalist, to find a vocalist to join an established group is a very difficult hurdle to do. And so that's kind of where I am. Do I join a previously established act, or do I have to try again from the ground up, auditioning individual members and praying that the individual members that I have are committed and willing to go through and go on this journey? I'll say it this much. WCS is the farthest I've ever gone with a band. We had a radio station, a major radio station, 102.1 The Edge, interested in us. We filmed music videos. We were doing shows outside of Toronto, able to go into Oshawa and able to go into Hamilton. But it unfortunately did not go as far as I'd like it to. My music career is one of consistent stops and starts. And it is of me having to dust myself off and routinely keep going. And I can understand why so many people that were in bands don't want to do it anymore, because they go through this and it becomes too emotionally and mentally taxing to start again. But music is something that I do well. It's something that I do extremely well. Being able to talk, being extroverted and putting on a great stage show, being able to look at music and go, here is the melody, this is how the song should be. That is something that I do extremely well. I am not an instrumentalist. You saw me write some real basic stuff way back in the day. Some of my music has gotten better, but I work my best when I have actual musicians, actual instrumentalists, and looking at what they made and say, okay, this is how we make this commercial. This is how we have a finished product that people want to listen to and will want to enjoy. Versus, I don't mean any offense when I say progressive rock, but there are, like, if you were to get like old Genesis with Peter Gabriel stuff, right? Timeless as it is, if you were to bring that to a modern audience, it wouldn't fly. And so it's about looking at the wonderful the musicality in that, and sitting there going, okay, how do I make a commercial product out of something so incredibly beautiful and abstract? And that's what I've done with all my other stuff. And I'll say, for me, once again, one of the biggest problems is I'm a person who very much thinks 5 steps ahead, as opposed to what's currently going on, because I want to figure out what it takes to grow. When this EP was done, the only thing in the back of my mind that had happened when the recording was done and all of that was I had already thought of what the next EP was going to be. And this was even before I had recorded vocals. This is back when the band was together. So I was looking at it going, okay, the next EP that we're going to do is going to be called Memories from Better Days. It's going to have more of an alternative rock slant. It's going to have this song, this song, this song, this song in this particular order. This is probably what I want the album artwork to be. Like, I had already had this planned and ready to go. The only thing that was really missing was the money to finance it and getting the members of the band in the studio to record that. So for me, once again, there was so much potential, so many good songs that we were going to do that, unless you were there at those live shows, are never going to see the light of day. And I'm glad that this EP was done. I'm just really sort of ticked off at what had happened between Mario and Paul and Mikey, and knowing that the plan was this EP, World on Fire, was going to be followed up with the second EP that had been agreed upon by all the other members. And the fact that we didn't get to do that, once again, feels like another rug pull, another slap in the face.
Sucks to hear that, man. Like,
It's a heck of a
you're
story.
still
though.
young, man. You're still young. You still got a lot to give,
Like I
man.
say, these types of stories, they go right back to the Beatles and further back than that.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm glad we got to hear it this evening, honestly.
Yeah.
Because I think looking back in your own career, it's an important piece of the puzzle of being an artist. If somebody is listening to this right now and they want to find you, how would they go about doing that? Is the information on the card there going to lead them to you, or is there somewhere you'd want to direct them?
So the WCS the band official is correct on Instagram. That's if you want. So if you want to listen to the music, go to wcstheband.bandcamp.com. That has everything that WCS recorded, right? You're not, like, if you look online, you will find us performing other songs, but once again, they sound rough because they're in a live setting as opposed to being polished by the recording process. If you want to personally follow me, as underneath my name, it shows Sonic MTD. You type that into Google, you will find everything. So even though I don't have a band, at the exact same time I started my music career, I also did content creation with my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/SonicMTD. I'm on Facebook. I have an official page for Sonic MTD. I have an official Twitter. I have an official Instagram, TikTok, you name it. If you want to get in contact with me, type in Sonic MTD to just about any, multimedia, social media type of thing. You will find me. And if you reach out to me, I read everything that is sent to me. So if you do want to get together, you want to start a band, you want to do anything like that, guess what? I will have read that. And I will most likely respond if I enjoy what you're laying down. And that's pretty much how it always is. If my YouTube channel, once again, I'm a nerd. I went to school for journalism because I wanted to be a part of XPlay and IGN and GameSpot. Like I wanted to review video games and say what makes them work and what doesn't make them work to make a better product. If you're into video game and anime reviews, go to youtube.com/SonicMTD. And my tagline is, where I guarantee you're going to love what you see. But either way, later days. There's one last story that I can tell you, because I know we're kind of pressed for time, but Chris, you had personally asked me about Mike Turner.
Yes.
And so I feel like it would be a good story to tell you. So this was back in 2012. This was just after, well, this was on the Sunday of Anime North. Nate was, this is with my first band, Searching for Kim. Nate was starting to want to leave the band because he was more of a jazz fusion kind of guy. And the stuff that we were making, the stuff that primarily I had made, was basic. And he's just like, well, I want to, learn and grow as a musician. I'm like, I got to do something to keep him in the band. I know, let's make some music. Let's record some stuff. At least, even if he bails, at least it'll show that we have something that was made. So I'm like, go out there, find some recording studios, and find one that'll work for us. Nate goes out and does that, and he sends me a link to a place called The Pocket, which is this one studio located in Leslieville. It's no longer there, unfortunately. But he had said, The Pocket Studio, this will be good. And I'm like, all right, cool. How much is it going to be? And he's like, well, we'll work on that. It's moderately affordable rates. And I'm like, all right, let's go and do this. When is it going to be? It's going to be on, and he lists the Sunday of Anime North. And me, who's a nerd, is just like, oh, I don't even have the ability to stay to the end of this convention. God damn it. So I'm a little bit frustrated that I don't get to do it, but at least I was at Anime North for Friday and Saturday. So I'm there on Sunday, and I'm walking around Leslieville, a place that I've never been to. But like, there's houses near beachfront property. It's not bad, but it's definitely not the heart of downtown Toronto. And I'm like, where the hell am I? And I walk by all these houses, and I see this like small little 2-story sort of modernist office building. And I'm like, well, this has to be the place, I guess. The Pocket. All right. Well, let me reach out to this Mike Turner guy. And I sent him an email saying, hey, I'm here. Let me know when you're here. And I was there waiting, 5 minutes. I was already nervous because I'm like, I have no idea who this guy is. I'm assuming some like guy with like, librarian glasses, who's this dad who's been doing it for ages, some guy who's established, but I wouldn't know who he was or even care who he was. One of those people in the background. There are some people that are meant to be on camera, and there's some people that are meant to be like producers or showrunners. And I was assuming it would be a showrunner. So 5 minutes goes by, 10 minutes goes by, 15 minutes goes by, and I'm getting pissed now because I'm just sitting there going, I've been stood up. And oh Lord, if I can't believe this happened, I'm going to lose my 25 minutes rolls by. Red motorcycle pulls up, and I see this guy, swing his foot over, take off his helmet. I'm making it sound more badass than it really was. It's almost sounding like something out of an 80s movie, but takes off his helmet, and I see this guy with like blonde hair who looks like a rocker. And I'm like, this guy looks pretty cool. And he goes, are you Matthew? And I'm like, he knows my name. Yes. Oh my God, this might be Mike. Are you Mike? And he's like, yeah, just give me a second. And I'm like, this guy seems pretty cool. All right, cool. Well, let's figure out what's going on. And so he starts talking for, a little bit as he takes his keys in and walks up. And he's just like, go over to the waiting room for a second. We'll talk for a bit. And so we go over to the waiting room, which is pristine white. Like almost everything there is white minus the TV. And right in front is this giant sort of glass window that overlooks the beach and everything that's there. And to the right of that is a platinum record for Our Lady Peace's Clumsy, 1 million albums sold. And I looked at it and I'm like, I pointed at that and I'm like, that's pretty cool. And he was like, yeah, it's the band that I was in. And I'm in the back of my mind, I'm like, you were in Our Lady Peace. And he kind of clued in almost that it was like now he realizes, okay, yeah, I'm the guy who hired Rain Maida. I started the band. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, doot, 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 doot. Don't be starstruck. Hold it in, Matthew, for the love of God. So he brings me the Pocket Studio is not really a big recording studio. So there were 2 recording studios, one on the left, one on the right, and there's like the actual place where you would go record music live. That would be this major door that's in the front. But like, he brought me in and he's just like, so tell me what you're trying to do. And I'm like, well, I'm trying to do a 4-song, EP. And I very much, I want something to showcase for the band. I think we're going to be all right. I'm worried about my throat. And he's like, you're worried about your throat. Why are you worried about your throat? I sound a little bit off. I don't know if it's because I injured my throat or something like that. And he's just like, he gives me sort of this deadpan look, and he goes and he grabs this acoustic guitar, and this acoustic guitar is old as hell. It used to be like solid black, but like parts of it have been chunked off and had weared and worn in time. And he starts tuning it, and he mentions, he says, I can't remember if he is just like, you're gonna play something for me, or if it was he was talking about the history of the guitar and then you're going to play something for me. But at some point he mentions, yeah, I got this guitar. It used to belong to Paul McCartney. And he's tuning it up, and he's just like, I think he wrote either Yesterday or Blackbird on this. I don't know which one. He tunes it up, and he hands me the acoustic, and he goes, you're going to play me some music. And immediately, once again, I'm like Johnny on the spot. I'm sweating. I'm just like, this is happening. This is really happening. I need to do the best I can. I can't mess this up. It's go time. So I put the guitar on my knee and I start playing Paper Cranes, which was the final song from that EP with Searching for Kim. Wow, I can't believe I forgot the name of my first band. I swear I'm a professional. So I start playing Paper Cranes, and he's basically sitting there with his hands on his head, and he listens and he nods and he goes, okay. So we're gonna get the rest of the band in, and we're gonna start recording. And in the back of my mind, he just immediately, to go from that transition, I'm like, I passed the audition. He's so nonchalant about it. He's like, yeah, you sounded great. I like what you got laying down. You sound a lot like the guy from Placebo. A comparison that has followed me to this day.
It's true.
Yeah. But he's just like, yeah, I want to get you in. I want to get the bandmates in. And so we recorded those 4 songs. Mike Turner, what I didn't realize is that he is a massive foodie. Absolutely loves food, was giving us recommendations for restaurants, and we fell in love with a burrito place called El Chino Loco, a burrito place called The Crazy Chinese. What? And as well as he was suffering through food poisoning, which made it all the more serious, because he would basically be sitting there as like, cool, well, my guts wants to violently leave my system, so I'm going to eat some healthy stuff, and then when I need to take a break, I'm going to go over and go to the washroom. And we had some negative things that were working against us. And what I mean by that is our drummer, Zach Marsh, could not play in time, even with a click track. So when you have music that isn't in time, Mike basically had to go and chop it up piece by piece. And it still doesn't sound in time, but it at least sounds the closest that you could possibly get with that negative stuff. And as a result of, the amount of work that he had to do, because it wasn't just simply, okay, cool, I have this part that'll work well. I have to change the entire layout of the song because the drums aren't in time. And since the drums aren't in time, We have to make it so that everything else flows relatively well so that it's not a jarring shift. So that EP cost me personally $3,500 because once again, I was the sole financier, and the other bandmates, they put in about $500 altogether. But it was an amazing experience. And, occasionally we would walk out and there's another band that's in the next studio and we're looking over and going, who's this person performing? Oh, it's Sean Desmond. Who's this person performing? Oh, it's Courage My Love. And like I once again, for me, even though we spent so much money on that, for me, it was sort of like an eye-awakening sort of thing because I'm like, I wish this could be what I do. And I learned a lot about the recording process and what goes into it. And, Mike Turner, even though you can make the argument that it's like, once again, well, you were paying him, so of course he's going to be chummy with you. But like, he really did sort of take me under his wing and sort of like teach me at least the basics of, the industry and some things about the recording process that I had never known about. And it was a great experience.
Very cool.
So this is another story where like you got inspired by Chris. He was on stage like ripping the guitar for like about 20 minutes.
Oh, okay. You want to know this story? Okay. I can
Yes,
tell you.
please.
So I remember this story like the back of my hand. This is what actually got me connected with the Toronto music scene. I was kind of surprised that you told them about this, but I will tell this story. So I did not know Chris at this point. All of this is from the first time I met him. So I was in a one-year program called Media Fundamentals, which was sort of like a refresher course for people that are like, okay, you want to get into media. Well, this is something that is sort of like a basic thing that you can either do photography or you could do graphic design or you could decide to eventually go into filming or television or something like that. It's kind of like an all-in-one program. And so Chris was in the other program and I was just sort of sitting there. I believe I was either waiting for the girl I was dating or I was killing time for the bus. It was late at night or so. And I was playing the greatest hits of Moist. I don't remember what was the exact song, but Chris comes out of his, the class that he's at, and he hears me because I had a small little speaker, and he immediately hears David Usher and he hears Moist, and he's like, you listen to Moist? And I'm like, yeah, I listen to Moist. And he's like, awesome. And we start talking, we start, hitting it off because I'm a very extroverted person. And I'm like, I'm willing to become friends with anybody. Let's see where this goes. This might lead to something cool down the line. And he's like,
to us meeting Moist. So there was that.
Yeah. So yeah, we eventually wound up meeting Jeff Pierce, but that is another story. But, Chris, and once again, this is me just meeting him. So all we did was we talked about our mutual love of like alternative rock. And he had mentioned, hey, I'm doing a show tonight at a place called the Big Bop. And the Big Bop is this venue that no longer exists in Toronto. It was on Bathurst and was it College? Was it Bathurst and College or Bathurst and Queen West?
I think it might have been Queen.
Yeah, either way, semantics. But I'm performing at this place called the Big Bop. The Big Bop is this 3-story venue that had multiple smaller venues inside of it. It had the Reverb, which was sort of like this middle of the road, almost a pool hall kind of vibe. And then it goes over to the side and there's like a small little room to the thing. And then there is a grand floor, which is called the Cathedral, which I had never been to. And the bottom floor was, what was the bottom
hella
floor?
cool.
Huh?
Sounds hella cool.
Yeah, it was.
Oh, it was a great venue. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was multiple venues in one building, basically.
I'd like to see photos of that.
Yeah, we can definitely show them later on. But Chris said that he was performing at the Reverb, which is the one of the places. And I walk in, and I see this pool hall type of setup, and I see this is a semi decent sized stage, and I'm looking around going, this is a pretty cool venue. And there are high schooler kids that are in here as well as because this was sort of like the place where if you're underage, we won't sell you alcohol, but we'll get you on stage kind of thing. And so I'm just like, all right, Chris is going to perform at this main thing. And he's carrying his guitar and his amp, and he makes a beeline for the side door. And I'm like, where are you going, Chris? And so I go in to this small little dormitory, which has Christmas lights hanging off. And Chris, quite honestly, was playing on a side stage. And it wasn't really a stage. It was more like a dormitory. But I'm sitting there and I'm listening to avant-garde experimental rock that I thought was planned. It turned out that Chris was jamming the entire time, but I, who had never experienced any form of like experimental or avant-garde, like all I know is I really like music that's on CDs, so I had no sort of background or information for this, and I was blown away just based upon like what Chris was doing. And I'm just sitting there looking at him going, that was really cool. I'm intrigued. I want to see more. And that was sort of him introducing me to the Toronto music scene. Because once again, I had no idea I wanted to be a musician at that point. Like I went and I played Rocksmith. I covered Oasis songs, but you know, like being able to write my own stuff. And so Chris helped get the wheels turning for that. I tried immediately afterwards to create a band with Chris. That went sideways real quick. We had a deaf drummer, a bassist who never really gave a damn, and it just
drummer.
Yeah. Well, we eventually replaced him with this other dude, right? But like that other dude was not a good fit either. And it all just collapsed in on itself. But
finding a band and putting it together is always a challenge. We probably should have tried a bit harder in retrospect, because I think we were both actually willing to put in the work, which is the hardest thing to do. But
and that was sort of the thing. Like my major problem, once again, because you know both of us had drive, but both of us had a different skill set. And what I meant by that is
it sounds like scream. You know?
Yeah. Well, the problem, for example, one of the things that was an issue with you was when I realized when I was writing music, right? You had told me I don't know how to play chords. And
What?
yeah, Chris didn't know how to play chords.
I mean, it's true. It's true and it's false, right? Like I hate theory. I reject theory. That's what at least that's where I was at that time. That's what that whole avant-garde thing was about. Was like, I reject your fucking theory. You know what I mean?
I can understand that, but once again, I was trying to make music that was reminiscent of the 90s alternative stuff that we had grown up and loved and appreciated.
At least 8 chords.
Yeah. And so as such, like I was writing music and I'm like, okay, I'm playing an open A and an open G and an open D, and this is, you know, I'm giving him like basic chords and things like that. And I think this is a bar chord, but I don't know what this chord is called. And he would just look at me and go, I don't know. I don't do chords. And I'm like, at that time, you know, the girl that I was dating looked at me and I'm just like, I don't think Chris is going to work out. And she's like, Chris isn't going to work out right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, 3-4 years later, probably would have been a little more in sync as I kind of moved along, you know.
Yeah. But at that point, I was in Searching for Kim, and that lasted 5 years. And then I was in City and Wires, which lasted 2.5. Luckily, I was able to see the warning signs, and I'm like, I got to put this down, because if I don't put this down, this is going to kill me. And then WCS happened, and you know, we had made such amazing music to the point was I was looking at it from the perspective of, cool, well, this music has to live, right? So whatever crap I have to go through, I'll find replacement players. So long as it's me and Paul that are still in this band, we can weather this storm. And when Paul left, that was it.
Well, I know Alex and I both wish you well, and I think you will, and I think you know you will. But I think
Yeah,
personally,
you're gonna
just
thrive.
I think you're on point there, though. It is like you are kind of like like David Bowie is David Bowie, and or the Cure is there are bands that always have a rotating cast,
Mm.
and your journey through music is certainly it is you and the people you meet along the way. So keep the work you've done, right?
Yeah.
Keep it. It's your resume, and go forward and find more musicians to work with and carry the stuff that you've already done with you into it. That's what I would say.
Mr. Dan in the chat says, I want to sing in a Toronto band. Don't do it. Save yourself while you can. Get out, you fool. Fly.
I mean, yeah, Toronto. You can get lost in Toronto.
Yeah,
it's a
but
great city. It's just
What's up with the cover bands over there?
So this is also another thing that causes me to shake my head. It is way easier to put together a cover band and
That's crazy.
to gain traction as a cover or tribute act rather than putting together something new from scratch involving your own original art. And that's one of
And they
my
make a
biggest
lot of
problems.
money.
Yeah, and that's one of my biggest problems with Toronto. I absolutely detest that about the scene. And it sucks. But I also know, because one of the things that happened during the break was I auditioned for a Red Hot Chili Peppers tribute act. And the thing is, I don't mean this as an insult against Anthony Kiedis, but his vocal melodies are not challenging to me. The only song that I might have a problem is Give It Away. And the reason why Give It Away is a problem is there's a lot of syllables in that. So you have
give it away.
give it away now. Yeah, like you have to find those points in between where you can get that oxygen back into your lungs. Because there's so much that he's doing in those parts. That's where it gets challenging. And I'm looking at these guys and I'm sitting there and I'm like, if I wanted to, I can make a lot of money doing this. And I can do this easily. But this isn't going to make me happy. And as well as Red Hot Chili Peppers, they're a good band. They're not in my personal top 5. So I know it's going to be a matter of time before it wears on me, right? So I was just looking at it and I'm like, guys, I don't mean any, insult whatsoever. But I don't know if this is something that is going to be a long-term fit, because I can do this stuff. I can memorize the songs, but it doesn't impact me quite as hard as doing my own. And as well as I've just never been the biggest Red Hot Chili Peppers fan.
What kind of cover band would you be in?
Oasis.
Well,
Fair
Mr.
enough.
Dan.
Oh, yeah.
I have a day job building furniture for people. I love it. But yeah, Toronto is painful. If I want to be Liam Gallagher, I should move to the UK. I love hearing about all of this. So we've synced up. You'll be my Liam. Okay, cool. I will be Noel, and we will make some amazing covers before you do something that pisses me off and then
You
makes
guys
me
gonna
want to
go fight on
leave.
stage?
Yeah, we're gonna fight on stage. I'm going to grow my hair out. I will have the best bowl cut and unibrow that you have ever seen. Actually, truth be told, because Chris was there for this in the early days when I was really into I'm still into Oasis, but like when you start off and you don't know what you're going to sound like, you don't know what your voice is going to be, you imitate others, and then after you've done the imitation for a while, then you start realizing, okay, this is what I'd rather be. I would sing and I would talk in a Manchester accent. And there was a brief period. You remember this, Chris?
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. And there was a brief period where like I was causing problems because once again it's like, Matt, you're pretentious as fuck. And I'm like, yeah, I am. But I'll say one thing, like I am unique when it comes to my stage presence, how I carry myself, how I treat live shows, how I act when I'm on stage. There are, like, I've seen a lot of bands. I haven't seen anyone who comes close to what I do. And that's one of the reasons why I want to do music. Because for me, when I get on stage, it's very much like I feel like I have a purpose. It feels like I'm able to breathe in a world that consistently garrotes you. Lightly does it, but like when you work 40 hours and all you can do is just pay your rent, and that's not enough to settle down and get married, have kids, plan for a retirement, music and YouTube becomes an escape. And music is something that I'm going to continuously do. Right now, I'm doing YouTube and video game reviews because I can't do this solo. So while I wait for that, when I get, whoever comes along and we're able to do a new music project and go from that point, I'll shift my focus back to the music. But, this is my life. I'm not going to just completely give up just because the first 3 crashed and burned in front of me. You got to keep moving. Otherwise, what do you got?
And we
You're
will,
down when you give up, man. You don't give up.
we will definitely catch up with you again.
Oh, yeah.
and
A year
see
from
how
now,
things
you're
are
going to be
moving
all
along.
like,
Yeah.
guys,
Excellent.
boom.
So I'm going to say it has been an absolute honor to be part of the show once again, Chris. Alex, I don't know if we've spoken before, but if we haven't... we have? Cool. It's a pleasure to meet you again. If you are interested, once again, Sonic MTD on YouTube, on Twitch, on Twitter, on TikTok, on Instagram, on whatever, you name it, Sonic MTD, you will find me. Let's talk and figure out where to go to from that point on. But either way, later days,
Contact
everybody.
him, Mr. Dan.
I do love the honesty, man.
Have a good night, everybody.